we think about what problems Australian farmers and participants in the agricultural system are facing, there are some really deep issues that need to be solved for in Australia, and they basically fall into three buckets. So one is environmental, so the impact of climate change, the naturally dry and arid environment that much of Australia has, and the challenges that that poses to productivity from an agricultural perspective. And there's also the changing face, I guess, of the way in which we grow crops. So there are lots of emerging farming systems and production systems such as regenerative agriculture and that sort of thing that are starting to take hold in parts of Australia. And they're really looking to address issues around soil management, making sure that we're conserving the land for the future and using healthy soils as a basis for productivity rather than just inputs. So that's one of the set of problems that many farmers are trying to deal with. Another set of problems has to do with, in Australia, the impact of being regional and rural is quite intense. You know, we're a really large country. Farmers live a long way from cities. Our agricultural towns are quite small because we're not a large population. We're about 25 million people in Australia. And therefore, connection to services like the internet and the ability to actually take advantage of new technologies that are coming on board is something that is a real issue for many farmers. I guess the third thing that I would say is a real problem is the lack of connection between all parts of the agricultural system. So in some ways in Australia, there is a lack of continuity of effort and investment when it comes into different parts of the agricultural system. So we're not connecting well with what's happening in farm tech. We may not be, so the AgTech ecosystem itself is very early and evolving. And I wouldn't say that's a problem, it's more of a challenge, I guess, but it is something that, we need to contend with and we need to do better than what we're doing now. I guess the other thing that you mentioned, Diana, was around farm justice. And so the way I think about that is, from a farmer's perspective, it's a strange conundrum they face themselves in. They are selling their production, so the goods that they produce, whatever crop it may be, they basically sell at wholesale prices at the lowest entry point into the supply chain. And they don't have an ability to participate too much further down the supply chain to capture the higher values that the product gets as it becomes refined and closer to market. And yet, in terms of their inputs and their cost of financing, they're actually paying, retail rates. So it's a very difficult equation to make work for farmers. In some ways, it's simple to say that we don't pay enough for our food and we don't actually, understand the true cost of production. But farmers themselves, don't have access to, at least in Australia anyway, productive buying groups that pool their buying power to be able to purchase inputs at cheaper costs. And so that's why we've seen a lot of those types of technologies and business models evolve, for example, in the United States with Farmers Business Network. The core components that are needed in any track and trace is the ability to capture the right data, to know that that is being validated and verified, and to be able to post that to the digital asset as it moves through the supply chain, and then be able to serve that data up to the various people that need to know, whether that's authorities, whether that's the consumer. In certain situations like Walmart was experimenting with, where they essentially have a series of closed loop systems, it's much easier to implement an AgriDigital style solution with the blockchain component that we have. In more distributed, highly disconnected environments, that they are going to pose more of a challenge for us all. And that's where I think the best chance for blockchain to really show its power comes into being. But we're going to have multiple applications. So it won't just be AgriDigital, it'll be a number of other application providers as well that are gathering and posting data to the chain. And this is something I think we'll see evolve over the next 5 years. That's a really interesting question, because I think there are many, certainly on our team at AgriDigital who are just as committed as I am to the mission that AgriDigital has, and they hold the values that I hold really dearly. So I don't think that's necessarily what separates the entrepreneur and the employee. I think there's actually a blurring of lines that's starting to happen. In my case, I've got two co-founders as well, so two co-entrepreneurs. We think of ourselves as seeding the idea and that becoming AgriDigital, but really the employees then start to take that and make that into something even better than what the entrepreneur originally conceived. So maybe it's just that the genesis of the idea, the willingness to take the first risk, and perhaps even the desire and the ability to put financial, the finances in to be able to support the idea, comes initially from the entrepreneur. I think there's certainly a risk-taking attitude that entrepreneurs have that some employees don't have, and that's a good thing. We don't want everyone to be entrepreneurs. There's room for everyone. So one is, actually I've got so many female entrepreneurs that I admire, but I particularly love what Catherine McConnell is doing at Bright in the solar energy and finance space in Australia. She's definitely worth checking out, and she's got a great team working with her. So she's amazing. I think that another, fantastic woman is Leanne Kemp with Everledger. She has incredible leadership charisma, and I think has really set the scene for many of the blockchain startups and supply chain use cases. So I think she's been amazing for that part of the industry. And I guess another person who I think is in some ways an amazing entrepreneur as well is J.K. Rowling. We think of her as an author, but really she's created an incredible industry around Harry Potter. And, she did that just with the genesis of an idea and a complete sense of self-belief. So I think she's amazing as well.